So let's see if we can understand what a function pointer actually is. A function pointer is simply a variable, well, it's a pointer variable, that holds the address of a function. Not the address of another pointer or the address of a variable or the address of a piece of memory. It's the address of a piece of code that you've written. In fact, it can be any function that is available to you. It doesn't have to be a piece of code that you've written. It could be a piece of code in the standard C library. Any function that is available for you to use, you can point a pointer to. That's what a function pointer is. Now, that doesn't really tell us very much. So let's have a look at it a bit deeper. Before I go and actually show you the syntax involved, I've got to stress this to you. When declaring a function pointer, you must include in your declaration the function's return type and the function's parameter types, if there are any parameters. What am I trying to say here? When you create a pointer to a function, you have to explicitly say what type of function it is. You have to say, well, it's a integer function that takes two parameters, the first one of which is an integer and the second one is a char. Or it's a void function which takes a single parameter which is a pointer to a char. Or it's a void function that takes three integer parameters. Or it's a function that returns a pointer to a float and it takes three floats as parameters. That sort of thing. You have to be very specific. Each pointer to a function must have the fully specified return type and parameter types. Okay, now that you know that, let's go and have a look at them. Declaring a function pointer. Let's say we have two functions. We're going to use our employee example. Remember our employee structure? We've got one function that reads employees and we've got another function that prints employees. Notice they're very similar functions. In fact, if you were just to look at the prototype here, the only thing that's different is the name of the function. And that's quite handy for us. Anyway, they're both void functions and they both take a single parameter which is a pointer to an emp, which we know happens to be an employee structure. Okay, now we could declare a variable that could point to either of these functions, either one, because they happen to be the same. They happen to be both void functions that both take one parameter which is a pointer to an employee. That makes them the same, and that therefore we can have one variable that could point to either one. And the variable would look like this. Okay, let's start having a look at the similarities between that line. Now that is a function pointer, whereas the previous two are function prototypes. The last line on the screen is an actual variable declaration. It certainly doesn't look like it is, but it is. It's a variable declaration. It is a variable that is a pointer to a function. See the little asterisk there, the first one in the declaration? Remember how a pointer to an integer reads int star pointer, and this reads essentially void star pointer. So it's a pointer to, well, it's a pointer to whatever the rest of the line reads. So it's a pointer to something that takes one parameter that is a pointer to an employee and that also returns a void. That's what it's a pointer to. That's how you describe it. Notice the brackets around just before the asterisk and just after the word func pointer. Func pointer, func_ptr, is the name of the variable. Okay, so that's what a function pointer declaration actually looks like. Let's have a little bit of a closer look at that. There is our declaration again. It's exactly the same from the previous slide, and that is very different from that. That's how a lot of people are inclined to declare a function pointer, and they're wrong. That is a function prototype. It's a prototype of a function called func pointer that takes one employee structure pointer as its parameter and returns a pointer to a void. In other words, it returns a void pointer. Its return type is void star. So in other words, the previous line on the slide is a variable declaration and the last line is a function prototype. And the only thing that's different is the positioning of the brackets. I just want to draw your attention to that. Don't get that wrong. It's very easy to get it wrong, and your compiler will not allow it because the function prototype will probably be in the wrong place, and it'll be up to you to try and figure out what you've done wrong. Now, if you had a third function, let's say a function called printInteger, which takes one integer parameter and has a void return type or no return type, it is not possible to assign function pointer to point to print integer. It's simply not, because it's a different type of function. It's a void function, but this is a function that takes a single integer parameter as opposed to a single pointer parameter that points to an employee. Because the parameters are of different types, it means the function is a different type of function, and so you can't assign one to the other. That's just a rule. You'll get used to that in C. You simply cannot do that. Okay, the top line of this slide is the most important one. Void star function pointer, that is our declaration of a function pointer. If you take nothing out of this particular module, take that. In the next module, we'll look at how you actually use these things, what they're for.